Hi, it's Frank. I'm back once again talking about chord progressions. This time I'm talking about a variation on the blues progression we talked about last time. Recall that in that progression we had three main chords, the tonic chord, the subdominant chord, and the dominant chord, commonly referred to as the 1, 4, and 5 chord. In the case of those three chords, we had all we needed to go ahead and create a little bit of drama. And what I mean by that is if you think about the beginning of that song, the tonic chord is home, and then traveling away from it towards something distant, in this case the dominant chord, and then returning home for tonic, we were able to accomplish all that in 12 measures. Now 12 is a number that is of course divisible by 2. Turns out in music, symmetry is really important. So in general, we're going to be talking more about working with groups of measures that are 2, 4, or 8. The idea for that is because a lot of different forms of both old and new music rely on that kind of symmetry. Turns out that somebody noticed a long time ago, perhaps a group of people I'd say, that kind of symmetry was very pleasant to the ear. When there's a certain number of things that happen over a certain number of even measures that then are responded to with the same number of measures. So that's, as it turns out, where a lot of musical form lies. So beyond just 12 measures, we're going to start talking about things like 32-bar song form, which literally involves 8 measures, 4 lines worth of music, with different sections labeled in each of those 8-measure segments. All right. For today, though, we're just going to go ahead and look at 2 examples that use these kind of chords we saw before in the blues progression, the tonic, subdominant, dominant, but we add one more chord. Now, what's the logic behind doing that? Great question. What we're trying to do anytime we start a song is do something that creates a little bit of interest. Ideally, a lot. We try and do it with either a little bit of material or a lot of material. So if you think about it from the point of view of 1 going to 5 to 1, and then you stick a 4 chord between the first 5 and the 1 chord, then automatically you've increased the length of time you have to get back to the 1 chord. Doesn't mean you have to make it many, many more measures long. I mean, in the case of 12 bars, it's just 12 bars, right? But the idea is that additional chord creates some more tension by way of the harmonic possibilities, the notes that are in the chord and what you can play against it, as well as the possibility of doing more measures within that song utilizing that particular chord. So you're adding to the length overall as well as to the actual harmonic possibilities. So when we have this new chord that we're going to add, which is going to be called the submediant chord, it's going to be based on the 6th note of our major scale. So that means we're going to have the chords I already mentioned, but we're going to stick that 4th chord in there, and it's specifically going to come right between the 1 chord and the 4 chord. So that means we're going to go from tonic to the new chord I mentioned, submediant, the usual 4 chord, and then 5 chord. Now remember, in our 12-bar blues, of course, we went backwards. We had 12 measures, and we got to the 5 chord, then we went to the 1 chord when you get to the last 4 measures. But earlier in that progression, if you recall, we went from 1 to 4 and then right back to 1. Again, that's a well-established form. You can watch that video if any of this isn't making sense. But the point is, how you move chords around is what helps create a kind of interest level that works with whatever melody that you're putting on top. And the melody is usually the most important part. Chords are designed to accompany that, of course. So that's why we want to start thinking in terms of how the chords are complementing the melody, yes, but also getting comfortable and familiar with a lot of standard chord progressions like this one. Once again, when we have a 1, 6, 4, 5 chord progression, all we've done is stretch out how long it's going to take us to get back to 1. And on the way back to the 1 chord, the journey through other chords, we're hoping to add some more twists and turns by way of making something interesting happen with the harmonies, meaning what's happening between the melody and the chords that are supporting it. Through different ages of music, different eras, this has been handled differently. For the moment, we're just thinking about things from the point of view of a melody that's floating on top of some chords passing underneath it. All right, so in our first example, and by the way, the PDF that's linked in the description is going to offer 2 examples, and they're going to be in the keys that I'm about to address. I didn't go out of my way to specifically write out parts of any famous songs that I'm about to mention because, of course, we don't want any issues with copyright. The main thing to notice beyond that, though, really is that these progressions are popular for a reason. It's because of all the times they've been used and how pleasing they are to listeners' ears. That's why they keep coming up again and again, both in older music as well as in more recent music. So the 2 examples I was going to talk about today, though, of them, the first one is going to be from the Everly Brothers. A pair of brothers who began in the 50s and writing a lot of songs and became quite popular with their vocal melodies. Turns out they used a lot of progressions which were very common, and what they put on top of it and the way they sang them was what made them so special. So the first example is from a song called All I Have to Do Is Dream, and it uses the 1-6-2-5 in the key of E. So as a reminder, if we're in the key of E, our 1 chord is E, 4 chord is A, 5 chord is going to be based on B, but we're going to make it dominant 7th chord, so that's B as in boy 7. If I want to figure out the 6th from E, I can always just walk down a minor third, which is 1.5 steps. In this case, if I did that, just going backwards down from E on the 5th string, I would have E, E flat, D as in dog, what we could call D as in dog flat, or for our purposes right now, we're going to call C sharp, which is the same note with 2 different names. Enharmonic is that word. Same note, 2 different names. So for that C sharp minor chord, that's going to be thought of as the submediant chord in the key of E, which is our 1 chord. Submediant has a very special relationship with the actual tonic chord. They share notes, and 2 of the same notes, I should say. So the triad for E, which has E, G sharp, and B, shares E and G sharp with the C sharp minor chord, which consists of C sharp, E, and G. Now, that relationship is often thought of as something we call relative major and minor. So in the key of E major, the relative minor is C sharp minor. In the C sharp minor, the relative major is E. The distance between naming them is based on that 1.5 I mentioned, so they're always easy to locate in that regard. Beyond that, in this particular example, the 2 other chords we're going to use are A and B as in boy 7, as I already mentioned. So once again, tonic, subdominant, and dominant chords are there. The dominant chord is the 7th chord. All we did was add the submediant, the 6th degree. And in the case of voicing these, I just stuck with some triad and dominant 7 shapes that we've seen before, some inversions. Here's the E chord, C sharp minor chord, A chord, B7 chord. Again, just stay in that general area. All right, so the idea is as I move through those, not a lot is actually changing between them, because it turns out between the E, C sharp minor, A, and B7 chords, there are actually a lot of common tones. In fact, on the PDF that's linked in the description, I highlighted in red where there are common tones between the chord you're on and the previous chord. And in many cases, there's at least 2 notes that are the same. Turns out that kind of commonality makes for very smooth voice leading. That's part of why progressions like this have become so famous. They just flow very nicely. And as a result of that, it's very easy to put melodies on top of them, because you're not having to jump around with a lot of awkward chord tones that suddenly fit one chord but not the next chord. That's a big part of songwriting, as it turns out. Both old and new songwriting, by the way. It's not just from classical kind of songwriting. So once again, that was the first example. The second example, which you also see linked in that PDF, is from another famous song by an artist named Ben E. King. This song is called Stand By Me, and in its original key of A, we once again see the same kind of presentation of this progression. 1, 6, 4, 5. 1, 6, 4, 5 in the key of A means that we start with our A chord, A, C sharp, and E. Once again, walk down 1.5 steps from the A if we want to find the relative minor, or the submediant as it's called, in which case we then have F sharp, A, and C sharp. Again, notice the fact that we have 2 notes that are in common between that relative minor chord and the major chord. From there we get to our 4 chord, which is D as in dog, that's our subdominant. And then E7 in this case, our dominant 7th chord. And the same kind of thing applies here. Because of the commonality in notes, the common tones that are binding so many of these chords together, we get a very nice flowing progression. Now in this case, there's also a rhythm, which you'll see in the PDF, starting with the A chord, which leads to the submediant, subdominant, dominant, back to the tonic. Main thing to notice here is that the progression is stretched out in example 2 over 8 measures instead of just 4 measures. The same chord progression, but the double up on the tonic chord and the submediant chord, whereas in the first example, which is just 4 measures long, we see that each chord is receiving the same number of beats. Since both are in 4/4, just to be clear, in the first example, each chord is getting just 2 beats. So you can have the same progression stretched out over many measures or over fewer measures, but it's worth pointing out once again that in this case, both examples, the numbers we're talking about are based on units of 4. 4 measures for example 1, 8 measures for example 2. Same progression though. So again, as soon as you start adding some chords, then you find you have a little more flexibility in terms of how long you want to make progressions, or if you want to try and keep them short, make the chords change faster. The main thing is to notice this progression as you start to hear it more often, because it is everywhere. In my next video, we'll go ahead and talk about some more progressions and highlight some more things that happen commonly as we stretch out beyond just 3 and 4 chords in any given progression. Take care.